Anchor, happy Easter. So glad for you that you're tuning in from wherever you're at. Pastor Bryan here, and we're going to try something that I've never done before. You see, for centuries, Jesus' followers have gathered together on Easter and said, He is risen, and then the congregation responded with, He is risen indeed. So we're going to try to do this. I'm not going to be able to hear you, so I'm trusting you on this. So just go with me on the count of 3. He is risen. I think I heard you. Good job. Good job. Hey, today we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 28, verses 1 to 10. So if you have a Bible, open it up to Matthew chapter 28. Verse 1 begins like this. After the Sabbath, at dawn, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I've told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid, yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. And then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." I don't know what Easter was like at your home growing up, but for me, I knew that my dad was going to put out the Easter baskets sometime after we went to bed. And being the oldest, and the wisest, I got up early in the morning to check out the Easter baskets to see the best Easter candy and to reallocate some of those resources towards the less favorable ones to my brother's Easter basket and to relieve him of some of the more favorable candies. Now, Easter candy is kind of interesting. There's a couple staples. The first is Cadbury eggs, which, are pretty good until you get about halfway through. I don't know about you, but certainly like halfway through, I start to realize that it's a chocolate egg with a fake yolk inside, and I don't know, a little gag reflex pops in there for me. And then there's Peeps, which I am pretty convinced that they are Satan's attempt to sabotage Easter, so reject them in all efforts. But then there's the thing that I always thought was going to be like the prize of Easter. Every Easter, it always got me. The Easter bunny, the chocolate Easter bunny. Now, these come in a variety of forms. But they're always in this Easter floral box. Some of them are full frontals. Some of them are profiles of the Easter bunny. Some of them have colored eyes. Some of them have, chocolate carrots in their hand that they found from some chocolate vegetable garden somewhere. And every time I opened the box, I thought that it was going to be solid chocolate. And every year, I got fooled. I mean, what a terrible thing for chocolate companies to do to entice kids into thinking that there's like this 1 pound of solid chocolate only to find out that it's a hollow chocolate. Man. Well, every year I got fooled. And I'm glad I didn't get fooled on the Peeps. And my brother had those in his Easter basket. But, that is no way close to what the first Easter morning looked like. There was no fake grass, and there definitely were no hollow chocolate Easter bunnies. What there was there's two women, like running, moving, going towards the tomb. Mary Magdalene, and then another Mary. You kind of feel bad for this, the one she's just described as the other Mary, poor girl, but there's these two Marys. And they're going to the tomb, and the Bible says they went to look at the tomb. Isn't that interesting? It doesn't say anything about trying to see Jesus necessarily. They're just gazing at the tomb. That's kind of what the Greek actually means. Staring, gazing. You can imagine there's this kind of desperateness in that. The modern day equivalent would be just looking at the news feed, hitting refresh, seeing what's changed that you can't control. This is what these two Marys are experiencing in this first Easter morning. You imagine it it was hard. Not only was like a tragic event for them, but they had experienced Jesus in ways that, you and I actually haven't. They were there when Jesus healed lepers. When Jesus shared words, taught words that no religious authority, in the history of the world has ever communicated, with the power and passion and authority that no other religious authority has been able to communicate with. They heard that firsthand. They were there probably in the crowds when a woman grabbed the hem of Jesus's cloak and experienced healing rush into her body as she had been suffering for 12 years. What would that have been like? All of a sudden, the attention goes on Jesus, and then it shifts to this woman. And there, as the whole crowd circles around this woman, Jesus brings honor to her. He says, "Daughter, go and be healed." They were there as women watching Jesus honor this woman. What would it have been like? These two Marys, they probably had things pretty well imagined. Everything is going to get better and better. They were early adopters on Jesus, and they saw his power, his passion, his popularity. Crowds had followed him, and now it was not lining up like that. The biggest thing, even bigger than some of the healings, was like Lazarus. Lazarus had actually died, and Jesus heals. He brings Lazarus back to dead, from dead to life. But now Jesus was dead. Everything kind of was crashing down for these two Marys. And they're just looking at the wreckage of their dreams, gazing at the tomb in bewilderment. Did this really happen? Is there any way we can get a reset on this? But there, right in that moment, something shifts. You see, the second they get to the tomb, there's an angel that they encounter. And the angel says, "Do not be afraid." This is pretty typical of angels. Throughout the Gospels, which are the accounts of Jesus' life, ministry, death, and resurrection, when angels show up, they have to tell people, don't be afraid. It's as if their heavenly presence kind of just causes us, our eyes to get big and our shoulders to tense up as we experience panic encountering this different reality. In fact, earlier on in Matthew chapter 28, it says an earthquake happened, and the guards, who were supposed to be the powerful ones, shrank as if they were dead themselves. The power of this heavenly presence changes the whole scene. And so the angel says to these two Marys, don't be afraid. You know what's fascinating is that any frustration, sadness, grief, bewilderment, as they were reflecting on the events from the previous days, it's all of a sudden shifted a little bit. Now the dominant emotion in these two women is not grief and frustration and sadness, though that probably is still there. The dominant emotion is being awestruck, jaw on the ground. What does this mean? Angels only show up in pivotal times. They don't just kind of pop in to kind of catch up and talk and grab a drink and talk life. They show up in Scripture in pivotal times in the history of the world. And here these two Marys are encountering this angel in this pivotal moment at the place where their rabbi Jesus had been buried. Heaven, the power of heaven, it has the ability to put the problems of earth in perspective. The power of heaven has the ability to put the problems of earth in perspective. There's plenty of examples in the Scriptures about this. In the Gospel of Mark, there's this story of the 12 disciples in a boat with Jesus. And there's this squall. There's this big wind and waves. It starts, rocking the boat back and forth. Maybe it happened gradually. Maybe it just all of a sudden like blew in and started knocking the boat about. We aren't aware, but what we know is that Jesus is somehow sleeping in the boat, his head on a pillow. Everybody else thinks they're going to die. They're freaking out. They're like waking Jesus up. What's the deal, Jesus? Like, can you solve this problem for us? And why are you sleeping? And by the way, why did you take that pillow? We could have used that. And Jesus wakes up, calms the storm, silences the wind and the waves. And the disciples end up being more afraid of him than they were of the storm. You see, in the ancient world, everyone knew that only God has the ability to calm the storm. So now they're reckoning with the fact that they're in the boat with not just a great teacher, but God in the flesh. What does that even mean? Heaven has the ability, the power of heaven has the ability to put the problems of the world into perspective. Now, it doesn't like remove the problems of the world in any way that I'm not trying to say that all of a sudden the problems of the world don't matter anymore. It doesn't diminish the reality of the problems of the world. The problems of the world, as we are aware of, probably right now more than we were maybe any other time in our life, are very real. They're very real. What happens though is that the power of heaven puts them in perspective. It does this in a couple ways. One, when you encounter the reality of heaven, you see another world open up that you had been discounting before. Just like Mary and Mary thought it was done and defeated once Jesus went in the tomb, just as Mary and Mary thought that their plans were scrapped because the whole movement was squashed, now all of a sudden they're starting to see something else open and they're having to reckon with it. It's the paradigm is shifting and it's hard to understand what this even means. That's the first thing. But second, it starts to, when you really understand the power of heaven, you realize that you have access to it. And when you have access to the power of heaven, the problems of this world, are real though they may be, are certainly put into perspective. The next way the problems of this world are put into perspective is you start to realize, because there's another reality out there, this isn't the only reality. And this life is just really a comma as we look towards eternity. It's just a blink in the grand scope of time. This is what Mary and Mary are experiencing. Like that like there's another reality bigger than death, and it's coming into the world. This is the pivotal moment. And the angel has to say, don't be afraid. Because this is the crux of Easter, because this is like the center point of Easter, like, as a culture, we really don't know how to commodify it. We're really good at commodifying holidays. Like, we can put a Coke bottle in Santa's hands, and make Christmas something that, like it's just kind of commodified and domesticated. And, it's about a baby. We love babies. Thanksgiving, we can do Thanksgiving. It's food and family, and that's good. And Halloween, yeah, kids and weird adults get to dress up, and it's like the only socially acceptable day where we can ask for free stuff without, with it being socially acceptable. I mean, that's something to be celebrated, I guess. But Easter, that's hard to. I mean, can you imagine this advertisement as you flip over a page in a magazine or you scroll through a news feed? All of a sudden there's an empty tomb and it says it's got to be the shoes, Nike, right? Or like Jesus conquered sin and death in his crucifixion and his resurrection and is reigning at the right hand of the Father. Shop at Walmart. I mean, that doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. It's hard to commodify Easter. It's hard to put a consumeristic stamp on it, and because that's the case, we just don't know how to do it. It can't be co-opted, because Easter, at its central point, is about announcing the reign and rule of God through the death of Jesus and his resurrection. it can't be co-opted because it's about a king, right? Easter is about the reality moving from gray tones into vibrant and vivid color. Easter is about reality moving from 2D, where it's just flat surfaces, to 3D, contour and touch and shape. This is what Mary is experiencing. This is what both the Marys are experiencing. They're realizing that their thoughts, their paradigms, that things only go up and to the right or down and to the right, that it's either about success or defeat, really are too small of a paradigm to account for the reality of all of the world, because here is heaven and it's entered into the world, and it's making them rethink everything. Mary's problem, these two Marys, their problem, it actually is our problem. Because it's their challenge is our challenge. We're left with the question, will we believe it? We have to interact with the question, there is another paradigm other than the way of the world of success or defeat, but will we stake our life on it? Will you stake your life on it? The angels force us to ask this question. Because they say, after do not be afraid, they say, we know who you're looking for. You're looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He's not here. He's risen. That means at least two things. The first is that this wasn't some clasp your hands in the right way, close your eyes, feel good, spiritual resurrection, everybody feel good, yeah, kind of, doesn't it felt like he's just here? It feels like he's just here. No. This is a physical, embodied resurrection. He's not here. He's not there. He's going to Galilee. And we see later on that these two Marys, they clasp his legs and then they worship him. He's actually physically resurrected, having really defeated death. But it also means this, is that the source of meaning in this world is found ultimately not in the things of this world, not in the metrics of success, achievement, defeat, health, prosperity, security, comfort, not found in any of those things. It's not there. He has risen. Jesus, in dying and rising, shows us where true meaning can be found, and it's not found in the resources of this world. It's found in a person, Jesus. We are left with the question, will we believe it? Will we surrender to it? Will we stake our lives on it? This question is so relevant right now because we're having to interact with our limits in a way that we haven't typically had to interact with them. We can feel pretty independent and strong most of the time with our technology, our financial resources, all the things that are just at arm's reach because we happen to be in a pretty normally wealthy Western world moment where it seems like we can accomplish whatever we want, whenever we want, and now we're realizing we can't. And it's awkward and it's challenging. The lesson is that it's just exactly what's being communicated here. You cannot solve the world's problems with the world's resources. But it's funny what we do in situations like this. We start to realize we can't control, and so we start to get hyper-constrictive with control in other areas. We start to try to control our families, or we realize we can't control 401ks and medical supplies and all these things that are out there or even tangentially affect our lives. So we start controlling, anything we can to get our hands on. It's really just this plea, this act of control playing by the old paradigm that says if you can control it, then you're in control. Or we do other things. We get dumbstruck by the wreckage of our current moment. We gaze at the grave, so to speak, just as the two Marys did. We start gazing at the tomb. We're just kind of glued to the newsfeed. And to take the edge off, we just have a drink earlier or an extra drink until the earlier drinks become earlier and earlier and the extra drinks become extra and extra. Because we just don't want to have to interact with it. The problems of this world seem so massive and big, I just don't want to feel. Or, to quell the loneliness, we reach out to that destructive relationship from the past, who we know will respond to the text. And we know it's a destructive relationship, but it's also going to help us feel not so lonely, at least for a time. We try to do anything we can to get our hands on it, to make sure that, to help us feel like we don't have to interact with the problem so that we can feel like we're in control. We can have a measure of comfort and a little bit of security. And sometimes we trap ourselves in this negative thought pattern. Maybe our job has fell on insecure times and we feel shame. And all of a sudden we duck on community, on the anchor group, on life-giving relationships, on mentorships because we're afraid of the question being asked and us saying, yeah, I don't know where it's going to end up. Better to hide. It's all a plea for control. And just like the angels said to the Marys, they would say to us, meaning is not found here. He is risen. He's risen, which is the best news. Because the power of heaven puts the problems of this world into perspective. When you stake your life on the God who died for you and resurrected, you are not limited to the resolutions and the solutions this world offers. In fact, you can endure things in this world knowing there's more out there in the future. There's more access in the present because the power of heaven, it puts the problems of this world into perspective. So the question is, just as the angel said to Mary, the angel would say to us, it's not found in the unrealistic quest for control. It's not found in the escape with substances. Meaning and purpose, joy, it's not found in dumping on others to deal with your anger. It's not found in the negative thought pattern, that destructive old boyfriend, the self-hatred, the ducking on community. It's not found in any of those things. He is risen. Understanding and encountering the power of heaven puts the problems of this earth into perspective. And the verse goes on, as this passage goes on, it says, suddenly Jesus met them. You see, these two women went running from the tomb. And it said that they were hurrying away and they were filled with joy, but they were also afraid. It was almost like this Narnian door opened in the back of a wardrobe and a new reality opened up. They were trying to figure out, what does this even mean? We have the vantage point of history. We can look back and know how things line up. They didn't have that. And they're in the middle of their awestruck bewilderment, knowing that there was another power greater than Pilate, greater than the religious authorities. In the middle of that, they met Jesus. And Jesus said, you got to love it. Jesus said, greetings. Greetings. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. Isn't it interesting? They had more questions than answers in that moment. Jesus didn't explain everything they had questions about. They probably wondered, well, how is this even going to resolve? Like, what does this mean? How should I live in light of this? Their questions were a mile high, and their answer was one: He is risen. This is how it works. Even though their questions were much greater than their answers, they worshiped him. And the question is to us, as we sit in this situation where we have more questions than answers, as we try to figure out what does it look like to live. The question that we have to deal with is even in this challenging moment, where we believe that the power of heaven puts the problems of this world into perspective. Even in this challenging moment, where we run after Jesus with even all the mixed emotions that entail our present reality, and even with the questions, know that the one answer that we do have is Jesus, and it's worth it. It's worth staking our life on. And in that moment, will we worship him? This is a great moment for you if you haven't yet said yes to Jesus, because it's making us all aware, profoundly aware, of our corporate need. There's no highs and lows at the foot of the cross. It's level ground. And our current situation is revealing our collective limitation. We all need a power beyond this world. And the good news is that power has come near, and his name is Jesus, and he is mighty to save. So I want to invite you, if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, but are recognizing your need for him, I want you to click in the chat column, the little button that says, I'm saying yes to Jesus. And we have an Anchor staff member waiting, ready to pray with you, to care for you, to answer questions, to help you on your way towards true hope. And if you want to say yes to Jesus, again, if you feel like you've slipped off course and you're hearing this invitation afresh for you, go ahead and click on that same button. He's available to you. Jesus is saying, greetings. And the question is, will we worship him? The next thing we're going into is communion. And communion is a picture of the mercy and power of God. Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, he took the cup and he said, this is my blood, it's shed for you. And he took the bread, he says, this is my body, it's broken for you. At Anchor, we do this every week because we believe that we need to be reminded every week that God is good and he loves us. And so we are reminded with hearing these words, Christ's body broken for you, Christ's blood shed for you. And we're reminded with tasting the cup, tasting the bread. I want to encourage you as a family or as roommates to engage in communion together and be reminded again of the mercy and power of God in the face of Jesus. After that, we'll engage in worship again, and you'll go on celebrating Easter through the day. So glad to learn, to worship, to be with you, Anchor. We'll see you soon.